Welcome back to We Want Picks. I'm Artem MMA and I'm going to be talking about Bellator 296 Mousasi versus Edwards. I do apologise for being pretty late with this one here. I was pretty busy with university, and on top of that I had to look into 17 fights. 2 of them were cancelled yesterday, so now there's only 15 fights to talk about. That's still a lot of fights to look into, and with a lot of these Bellator prelims, I'm not super familiar with the fighters, so I've got to do a bit of digging, and it can be a bit time consuming. We're finally here. As you can see, we've got the We Want Picks premium website, and you can actually get a 3-day free trial if you do sign up using my link, so you get access to the We Want Picks website and stuff like that. And then over there, you get the 3-day free trial. You can cancel that anytime, but for 3 days, you've got access to everything premium there. We've also got a pretty active Discord server if you wanted to join that as well. That is totally free to join, and it should be in the pinned comment below. Let's just get straight into the predictions. So the first fight of the night is Stephen Hill versus Nicolo Solli, and this is an interesting one because in my article, which is part of my premium content for We Want Picks, I write articles for Bellator, for UFC, and for other smaller promotions in the premium content section. I said that Stephen Hill was the best underdog on the card. You can't get Stephen Hill as an underdog anymore. He is now minus 150 and up to minus 200 on some sportsbooks. But at the time of me writing the article a couple of days ago, he was minus 110. So if you got Stephen Hill at minus 110, you got a pretty good deal because now he's sitting at about minus 200 and Nicolo Solli is now the underdog. I do like Stephen Hill in the matchup. I think it's somewhat favourable for him, but he's just going to have to avoid the grappling of Nicolo Solli because Nicolo Solli is dangerous on bottom. Stephen Hill's style kind of is a pretty wrestling heavy style, mainly up against the cage. He'll take you down, he'll try and get your back, and he'll just kind of keep taking you down. It's a little bit frustrating for his opponents, but Nicolo Solli, he can get taken down, and if he does get taken down, Solli does work for submissions. We saw that in his win over Daniel Casale, and we have seen that in previous performances. When he does get taken down, he does try and work for submissions. I believe he actually has another submission earlier on in his career, which he got from his back as well. Now, Stephen Hill is the big favourite. He is expected to go the distance. Hill actually has 6 finishes out of 7 wins, but I also think he's going to win a decision as well. This is the biggest step up in competition for his career. He hasn't really fought the best guys. You know, he just fought a guy that was 7-9. He fought Andre Fusi, who was 8-6, and before that he was kind of just fighting guys on the regional scene. Now Bellator is stepping up the competition. They're giving him Nicolo Solli, who is dangerous, but I do believe Hill should pass the test, and maybe after this he'll get another step up in competition in his career. The next one is Jose Augusto versus Simone Biyong. I'm going to be going with Simone Biyong in this one here, but it's not the most confident pick in the world. I do like his power on the feet, and I do like his striking. And I think if he can keep the fight on the feet, if he can keep the fight in the range, he should be able to defeat Jose Augusto. I think Jose Augusto probably does have the better pure grappling, because I think Jose Augusto probably could work for submissions. He had Alex Polizzi in a bit of trouble before Alex Polizzi ended up getting the submission for himself. And he did get knocked out by Anthony Rumble Johnson. That happens. And Simone Biyong, you know, he's on a 2-fight win streak. Once again, this is a step up in competition for Biyong. He just knocked out a 3-1 opponent, but before that he did beat Luke Trainer, who was 5-0, but now Jose Augusto, I would say, is just another step up in competition from there. But I do think Simone Biyong will be able to get a knockout on the feet. He's going to have to avoid the wrestling, he's going to have to avoid the grappling, and he's also going to have to avoid being held up against the cage by Jose Augusto. But I think if Simone Biyong, using his big size advantage, because he is 6'5" with an 80-inch reach, if he can keep the distance and if he can continue to land his power shots, I think he should be able to find the chin, and I think he should be able to knock out Jose Augusto in this matchup. So I do have Simone Biyong to win by knockout, and so does the majority of people. Simone Biyong, I believe, is just a slight favourite. He's sitting about minus 140 on one sportsbook, minus 175 on another. So he is kind of a slight favourite. I am not too confident in him, but the odds do reflect that it is a pretty closely lined fight. And as we move up the card, Bourama Camara versus Romain Debienne is going to be the next matchup, and it's a lot closer than the odds suggest. Bourama Camara is sitting at minus 260 on Tapology. Money has come in on Romain Debienne, as it probably should, and he is now sitting at minus 240 is Camara. I'm still picking him, But if you kind of just see that minus 250, minus 240 price tag and think that he's safe to put in parlays, I would kind of recommend you just find someone else, because I don't have the most confidence in Bourama Camara, because both of these guys, they kind of are primary strikers. They do like to strike. Romain Debienne probably is actually the better technical fighter in this matchup, but Bourama Camara just so much bigger, and he does use his length very well and does fight kind of smart for a guy that is 6'4" with a 79-inch reach at 170 pounds. Now, Romain Debienne has actually fought and beaten the better opponents as well. He's got an 8-4 record, but that isn't really a testament to the guys that he's fought, because if you do look into his record, he did just recently defeat a 9-2 opponent and then a 6-2 opponent. You can't really find that on Bourama Camara's record. You know, he did beat a 5-1 opponent in Bellator, but he's not fighting, and on top of that, he's not beating the same level of competition than Romain Debienne. I'm just kind of picking Camara because I think that Debienne's not going to be able to figure out a way to close the distance, to find the range, and Camara's going to be able to use his length, his straight shots, and also his front kicks up the middle to keep the range and to win a decision, or maybe find a knockout at some point in this fight. I do like Camara in the matchup, very slightly though. I think Debienne could be a very live underdog, but it's just not a confident pick either way. I'm on the Camara side, but once again, as I did say earlier, if you see Camara sitting about minus 250, minus 240, and you just think that he's safe for a parlay, I think he's not. I think you should probably avoid putting Camara in a parlay. He's not a confident pick. You know, he's had less experience on top of that than Debienne. He's fought the worst competition than Debienne, which is usually like a big factor for me. I do actually like to pick people based on their level of competition, especially in a matchup like this. But I do like the size advantage. I do like the physical advantages that Bourama Camara does have over Romain Debienne in this one. So I am going to be going with Camara ever so slightly by decision, but it's close. I think it's too close for these odds. These odds they're interesting. Maybe I could be proven wrong on fight night and Camara does come out there and he does have a lot of success. But before the fight started and on paper, I don't like the wide line in this fight here. And another fight, which is a very wide line, but in this one I can actually understand, is Asael Adjouj versus Georgi Sasu. Asael Adjouj, I overlooked him in his last fight. I got caught up in the hype over of Liam McCracken, and I do apologize for that. But Liam McCracken was such a hyped prospect going into that matchup against Asael Adjouj, and Asael Adjouj just beat him. He just beat him up. You know, like Asael Adjouj is a very good kickboxer at 145 pounds as well. He's 6 foot tall, and he showed really good like defensive grappling. He was just able to deal with kind of everything that the grappler and Liam McCracken kind of tried to throw his way. And I like that for Adjouj. He's also fought good guys as well, 7-2 win in Bellator himself, and he's also fought for UAE Warriors, which is a great regional promotion themselves. He is sitting at minus 400, which is wide. Once again, you know, are you going to be put in minus 400 on a fighter with only 6 professional fights? Probably not, but maybe like you put him in like one parlay, maybe like a super long parlay with the big favorites. You could probably maybe get away with something like that. But Georgi Sasu, I just don't think he's going to be able to do what he wants to Asael Adjouj. You know, he fought in Bellator in his last fight, and he has beaten good guys himself, but Adjouj is going to be so much better at striking, and if Sasu does try and grapple, if Sasu does try and wrestle, Adjouj has already proven that he can deal with that against a very hyped up grappling prospect in Liam McCracken. So I do like Adjouj to win this matchup, probably by knockout or decision, keep the fight on the feet, use his superior striking, and win the fight that way. I do like him in this matchup. And next up, we've got Fabacary Diatta taking on Aridane Romero Rodriguez. And I'm going to be going with Fabacary Diatta, and I'm going to be going with him by knockout. Now, Fabacary Diatta has not got a knockout in 3 years now. Since then, he's kind of won a lot of decisions, but he does have a pretty good and well-aging win in a way over Dominic Wooden, who went on to be the Cage Warriors champion, but then he went on to lose. He was actually meant to be on Dana White's Contender Series in, I think, 2022, but he had like a contract issue and just didn't show up, and then he lost his next Cage Warriors fight. Fun fact about Dominic Wooden, if you really wanted to know. But I'm picking Fabacary Diatta to beat Romero Rodriguez. I think this should be a mostly striking matchup. And in the fight, I think that Diatta's a better striker. And on top of that, Aridane Romero Rodriguez is very hittable. You know, he kind of fights with his hands pretty low. And I think that Diatta is just going to be able to catch him. You know what I mean? Like Romero Rodriguez, he's just not as good at striking as Diatta. That's kind of just what it comes down to. He's been knocked out before. He got knocked out over an M1 against Sabit Zushabov. And then he was finished off by a 4-2 opponent recently. Now he's coming back. He's fighting in Bellator in France. And Diatta, as I said, he hasn't got a KO in 3 years. Sorry, I think he finds one here. I do think he's going to be able to knock out Rodriguez. He's just a better striker, taking on a guy with bad striking defense, and it kind of just is a recipe for a knockout. I do like Diatta here. He's a massive favorite, though he is sitting about minus 450, which is kind of insane. And I under pressure, I can't find him on the thing, so we'll move on to Tim Wilde taking on Chris Gonzalez. I like Chris Gonzalez as a pretty big favorite in the matchup as well. It's interesting though, because Tim Wilde did recently defeat a guy with a pretty similar skill set, I guess you could say, to Chris Gonzalez in Saul Rogers, and Saul Rogers is a pretty good wrestler. Chris Gonzalez is also a pretty good wrestler, and he's kind of got that classic boxer wrestler style. What he will do is he'll box to close the distance, he'll strike to close the distance with his boxing, and then once he's in close, then he can go for takedowns. And that's kind of what I think he's going to do against Tim Wilde. Now, Tim Wilde did show pretty good takedown defense in his last few fights. He probably does want to keep the fight on the feet, but I do think Chris Gonzalez is going to be able to utilize his wrestling and be able to get the fight to the ground. And I think he can defeat Tim Wilde with his skill set of just, as I said, boxing to close the distance and then taking people down. He's a pretty big and wide favorite, but I think he should be able to get it done here. A lot of people have him by KO, which is interesting. He does throw a lot on the feet, but I think he's going to wrestle with Tim Wilde. You know what I mean? I think that's what he's going to do. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. I'm going to be going with Chris Gonzalez in this fight here. And now we move up the card, and there's actually two pretty good prospects taking on each other. Savarjon Khamidov taking on Kevin Petshi. Now, Savarjon Khamidov, he came into his debut with quite a bit of hype. He took on a former UFC fighter, Jose Maria Tome, and he knocked him out very quickly. And Jose Maria Tome, for a little bit of background, for a little bit of lore, I guess, on him, which I know you don't care about, he actually was Henry Cejudo's BJJ coach way back in the day, I believe. I don't think he's his BJJ coach anymore, but at one point he was. And Khamidov kind of dispatched with him pretty quickly with a body kick. And he does have very good kicks. He does have pretty good straight shots down the middle as well when he strikes. And on top of that, he does, of course, have good wrestling and good top control. Kevin Petshi, he's pretty good grappler, actually. He's a decent striker as well. He's just kind of well-rounded. But the problem with Petshi is recently, he hasn't been fighting often, and on top of that, he hasn't been fighting good competition. His most recent win was over a 30-20 opponent. Before that was over a 19-25 opponent, and then before that it was over a 7-2 opponent, which is a good win, and it was Felipe Maia, who was actually pretty good himself. But we're talking about, like 2 fights in the last 3 years, and Savarjon Khamidov has been hustling. He's fought 5 times in the last 2.5 years. He did recently fight 6 months ago over Jose Maria Tome, and now he's coming over to take on Kevin Petshi. He's minus 700 favorite. I don't really mind it. On the feet, he's pretty dangerous, and on the ground, he's dangerous as well. I think Khamidov should be able to kind of just work kind of his whole complete game plan to defeat Kevin Petshi here. Most of the Tapology going by decision. I don't really mind the decision either, actually, because Petshi probably will be pretty hard to get out of there. He's got good enough grappling to kind of avoid what Khamidov's probably going to try and do. So I think Khamidov, on the feet, he should be pretty dangerous, and also he should have the good enough wrestling to get Kevin Petshi, to the ground. The next one is Yves Landu taking on Piotr Niedzielski, and this is a short notice fight for the Niedzielski fight because Yves Landu was meant to fight Estabili Amato, which would have been a much more favourable matchup for Yves Landu, and I would have picked Yves Landu to win that matchup. But now I'm going to be picking Piotr Niedzielski here. I think Piotr Niedzielski will be able to work in his wrestling and grappling against the tricky striker and good kickboxer Yves Landu. Yves Landu will want to keep this fight on the feet. Piotr Niedzielski will probably want to take this fight to the ground. Now, as I said, he is taking it on short notice, and as the wrestler, it can be quite taxing on him, and maybe he could tire late, but I'm just going to kind of trust that Niedzielski will be able to wrestle and grapple and find success in that department in the matchup. Now, he's actually coming off a very close loss to Richie Smellin in a fight which I picked Niedzielski to win, and Richie Smellin proved me wrong, you know. I believe Richie Smellin is still closely affiliated with the greatest of all time, undisputed Artem Lobov, whose signature is sitting on my door frame right there, and behind me is the UFC 285 signed posters. But I know, just in case you ever wondered what was behind me, but I'm picking Niedzielski. I'm picking him to win. I think he should win a decision. Maybe he slows down and loses the third round, but I think he should be able to bank the first two using the wrestling and grappling, and I think he's going to be able to get it done. And as we move up the card, you got Saul Rogers taking on Davy Gallen, and Saul Rogers, you know, he technically, on a technicality, won the Ultimate Fighter Season 22, but apparently, like, he got some sort of mistake in his travel papers to the USA, and he wasn't able to compete in the final. So technically he won Tough 22 way back in 2015, but also technically he didn't, because obviously Ryan Hall took on, once again, the GOAT in the final, and Ryan Hall ended up winning. But actually Saul Rogers defeated Ryan Hall on the show. And then after that, after a couple of fights, Bellator picked him up, and he's kind of been having very mixed results in Bellator since then. But I think he should be able to defeat Davy Gallen here. It is actually a pretty favourable matchup for Saul Rogers here, because Davy Gallen, he's a kickboxer. He throws a lot of kicks. In fact, he actually got a rolling thunder kick, which retired Ross Pearson, which is the most savage way to retire someone. You've got to watch it. It's actually it's quite a good knockout. It's very impressive. But I do think Saul Rogers wins this one here, because we have seen Davy Gallen get taken down, and we have seen him controlled. And Saul Rogers is a good wrestler. That's kind of what he does. He takes people down and he controls them. I think he wins a decision. I do think he's going to be able to beat Davy Gallen. I know that's a very short breakdown for this fight, but that's just kind of what I see happening. Davy Gallen probably is the better striker. He does throw a lot of kicks. I mean, he knocked out Ross Pearson with a rolling thunder, I'll say, for the third time, but you've got to watch it. It's a fantastic knockout, and it is sad. That's what Ross Pearson retired on, but it's a good KO. And Saul Rogers, yeah, he's just kind of got that style that he will take people down and control them. You know, he is coming off the loss to Tim Wilde, who once again is fighting on the same card. You do notice that a lot of fighters that have already fought each other will just fight on the same card in Bellator, because their roster is just a bit smaller than the UFC's, for example. He did beat Georgi Karakhanyan, which is a pretty good win. He's a veteran of the sport, but I think Rogers wins by decision. I think he can take down Gallen, and I think he's just kind of control him for the 3 rounds that the fight takes place. Oliver Enkamp takes on Luca Poklit. I like Enkamp in this matchup. I think he's more well-rounded. Poklit is a grappler, and that's kind of like, it's kind of what he does. You know, he works for a lot of submissions. He's just a very good grappler. He submitted a 9-3 opponent in his Bellator debut. But before that, you know, he was beating some pretty good guys, beating some pretty average guys as well. But Enkamp, you know, Enkamp's also a good grappler. Enkamp's a good enough grappler which he'll be able to hang in the grappling with Luca Poklit, and when the fight is on the feet, he will be the better striker. And as I said, he's just more well-rounded. Enkamp does have pretty good kickboxing. He does throw a little bit of kicks as well on top of his striking, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And he's also beaten the much better competition in his career. As I said, he's a good grappler, but on top of being a good grappler, he's also a good striker, and you just can't say the same for Luca Poklit. Poklit wants this fight on the ground, and he wants it to grapple with Enkamp. But even then, if he tries to get the fight to the ground, and if he does successfully get the fight to the ground, it won't just be lights out submission, because Enkamp does have good grappling himself. So I do like Oliver Enkamp to win this matchup. I think he should be able to get it done. I'm thinking a finish as well. I think a finish is likely from both sides. If Poklit wins, it's probably almost definitely by submission, but Enkamp probably could knock him out on the feet. Maybe he probably could submit him on the ground, which would be impressive, because as I said, Poklit is a great grappler. But I do think Oliver Enkamp does manage to get it done. He probably does find a finish in the matchup as well. And now we're on the main card, and you got Denise Kielholtz taking on Paula Christina. And I'm picking Denise Kielholtz, but at minus 300, just don't put your money on this fight, honestly. I think Kyohot should be able to win, and the odds do reflect that, but it's pretty sketchy, isn't it? Paula Cristina is a pretty good striker coming out of Nova União, which is quite famously a gym that Jose Aldo spent a lot of time at. A very, very good gym is Nova União. And Denise Kyohot is a very good striker from the Netherlands, you know what I mean? She's just a great striker. She hasn't won in a very long time though, and it was a KO win that she got. And then she went to a close fight with Juliana Velasquez, lost the split decision there. She got submitted by Kana Watanabe, but no real shame there because Kana is a great grappler. And then she went to a split decision with Alara Joanne, who is a pretty good striker herself. I'm picking Kyohot. It is just not a good feeling that I've got about this fight though. I think it should be a striking matchup. And I think Kyohot's is the better striker, and that's kind of everything I'm basing this fight on. But as you can tell, I'm pretty uncomfortable making this pick because I've just got a really bad feeling about it. At minus 300, once again, if you see Kyohot at minus 300, and that's probably where the odds still are right now. If you see her at minus 300 and you think that she's just automatically safe to be putting in parlays, she is not. She's absolutely not just safe to be putting in parlays, and she is still sitting around minus 300. You can get it minus 250 on some books. Minus 275 seems to kind of be about the average. Just stay away. Stay away. It should be a striking fight. Kyohot should win a decision. But even the public's not even on Kyohot's anymore. It's a bad one. We'll move on. Another striking fight. What should be a striking fight. Thibault Gouti taking on Kane Moussa. And Thibault Gouti, after a pretty sad UFC run where he went 1-5, he's kind of turned his career around. You know what I mean? He did lose a few times in UFC. As I said, he lost 5 times for the UFC. But he bounced back. He fought and beat Mehdi Baghdad. And then he beat some pretty good guys. Ended up in Bellator and just recently lost to Alfie Davis. But he should win this matchup. I'm picking Gouti to defeat Kane Moussa. Once again, it should be a striking fight. These guys should strike. And I think Gouti is the better and more technical striker out of the two. I like Gouti. He throws a little bit more kicks than Kane Moussa as well. But as I said, it should just be a pure striking fight for the most part. Maybe both guys might go for a takedown here and there. Maybe they'll go for the clinch. But I would say, and a very good majority of the fight should be at range. And it should be on the feet. And when that is taking place, I do favour Thibault Gouti in this matchup. I think he should be able to work away against Kane Moussa. I think he's going to work the body a lot early on because Kane Moussa probably has the worst cardio out of the two. So I think Gouti's going to be smacking that body with a lot of body kicks. He might even try and rip the body if he gets in close with the hands. But I think Gouti's going to be able to keep the range, throw a lot of kicks as he normally does. I think in this fight in particular, he probably will work the body a lot early on as well. Push kicks to the body and a bunch of just roundhouse kicks to the body as well. I think Gouti manages to get it done by decision here in a striking fight, which in my opinion, he's the more technical and better striker, so I think he should be able to win a decision. And as we move up the main card, now we've got Douglas Lima taking on Castelo Vancenise, who made me look like an idiot in his last fight because I actually did pick Kamil Onitschik as a pretty big underdog kind of against him because Castelo Vancenise was taking a lot of time off because he had pretty bad injuries, and that is why he's been somewhat inactive throughout his career. But he made me look really dumb. I actually really liked Kamil in that matchup, and it was such a bad read, and I do apologize for that. But he's taking on Douglas Lima. This is probably like a very important matchup for Castelo Vancenise because Douglas Lima obviously is a pretty big name. And on top of that, if you wanted to know a fun fact about Douglas Lima, he was actually in the Creed 3 movie. Now, Fight Night Picks mentioned it in one of their videos that they saw Douglas Lima and Diego Lima in the movie kind of preparing and holding pads for Creed. So I asked Carl Williams, who trains with Douglas Lima, if that is true. And it is true. Douglas Lima and Diego Lima were both in the Creed 3 movie. So in case you really wanted to know, I highly doubt that you did, but it's a fun fact. Douglas Lima is actually coming up to 185 pounds for this one as well. Obviously, it is pretty late in his career now. He's fought 43 times as a professional, and he did recently lose to Jason Jackson. I believe it's the main event in that fight as well. Lost to Michael Page in a very close rematch, actually, which Douglas Lima won the first time over Michael Page all those years ago in 2019. Now, I do actually think Castelo Vancenise wins this one, but it's a close fight. It really is. I just like Vancenise here. He just kind of showed me how wrong I had my read of his was when he took on Kamil Onashashik, who was a really good kickboxer, like a very good kickboxer with a lot of power, and I thought he was just going to be able to knock out Costello Vance Denise, but Vance Denise was smart to it, he avoided it. Douglas Lima will be the better grappler in this matchup, so I think Costello Vance Denise should probably just to kind of avoid grappling with Douglas Lima. I think he probably could have success on the feet himself, and then on top of that, Lima does have KO power, but I'm just going to once again trust Costello Vance Denise to avoid that KO power and get the win over Douglas Lima. So I've got Vance Denise to win by decision. It's a close fight. You can kind of tell in my voice and the way I'm talking about the fight that I'm not very confident in it, because I'm not. But momentum really is on the Vance Denise side. He seems to have the injuries all sorted. Douglas Lima, you know, he's on a bit of a losing streak, as I mentioned as well. He probably took a little bit of time away to literally film in the Creed movie. I mean, if Creed wanted me in the movie, hey, call me up. I want to be in the Creed movie. But let's just move on to Mansour Barnawi versus Brent Primus. Now, Mansour Barnawi, it's a little bit bittersweet with me because he's so good and I'm so happy that he's fighting again and I'm so happy that he's in Bellator. But what makes me a little bit sad is that he took 3 years away because he won the Road FC tournament. I don't know if you guys know this, but Road FC hosted this tournament. And I believe the tournament took place over like a very long period of time. And Mansour Barnawi won the Road FC tournament, and I believe he actually won $1 million with that tournament. And then he took about 3 years away from fighting. We're about like 2.5 years away from fighting, and that's kind of where I'm like, man, like I'm so happy Barnawi's back, but I'm also kind of like, man, like I just wish he didn't have to take 2.5 years off. But I don't blame him, dude. He won the $1 million. He probably had a fantastic time, but now he's back, and now he's fighting for another set of $1 million in another tournament in Bellator, because it's a tournament quarterfinal between Brent Primus and Mansour Barnawi. I think Barnawi gets it done by submission. I believe this is short notice for Primus as well, because I think Barnawi, he was meant to fight Sydney Outlaw. He would have won that fight as well, in my opinion. Now Brent Primus steps in on short notice. He's coming off the loss to Alexander Shabalai, who was also in the tournament. He's also lost to Islam Mamedov. I don't think Mamedov's in the tournament though, but Benson Henderson was, and then he retired after we lost to Usman Nurmagomedov. Sorry. I got him confused with someone else real quick. I like Barnawi, and I like Barnawi by submission, dude. Barnawi's got really good grappling, and I think that it cannot be underestimated. And it's going to be very interesting because I think Barnawi's going to be fighting Usman Nurmagomedov in his next fight. So it's going to be very interesting because, as I said, Barnawi does have very, very good grappling. And I do think that Barnawi probably is one of the best lightweights in the world. Especially one of the best lightweights in the world not signed to the UFC. And Barnawi, man, they really should have tried to bid for him, you know, when he announced that he's coming back. But Bellator got to him. Bellator's actually signed a lot of really good guys recently. Barnawi is one of them. Beat the UFC to it, maybe offered us more money, something like that. I don't know, but Barnawi's here. He's fighting for $1 million. I think he gets a submission. It's a great fight. This is a very good fight. Both guys are good grapplers. I didn't really give Brent Primus any flowers, and I do apologize for that. But I'm on the Barnawi hype train. You know what I mean? I think he does get it done here. Him versus Usman Nurmagomedov could be a pretty close fight, and I do look forward to it if it does happen. But for now, I'm going to pick Mansour Barnawi to defeat Brent Primus in this matchup here. And now we move up to the main event, and an interesting fact that I have noticed about this main event is it's going to be a 3-round fight, and I believe that must just be because Barnawi versus Brent Primus is going to be a 5-round tournament final. So it's going to be interesting that we've got a 3-round main event. Maybe they could have made Barnawi Primus the main event, but I guess Mousasi and Fabian Edwards probably collectively hold bigger names than Barnawi and Primus. So I guess it kind of does make sense, and especially Gegard Mousasi at one point, it looked undefeatable. Unbeatable, I guess, would have been the better word. English is very difficult. But Gegard Mousasi, you know, he just dispatched Vanderford very easily. He dominated John Salter, who's now gone on. I believe he beat Aaron Jeffrey recently, which was very impressive. He beat Douglas Lima, who we just talked about before. He beat Lyoto Machida, who Fabian Edwards also fought. And the interesting thing about Lyoto Machida and Fabian Edwards is, I don't know if it was like a respect thing, but I did actually pick Lyoto Machida to defeat Fabian Edwards in that matchup, and was it a bad pick? Yeah, maybe in hindsight, but I thought that maybe Machida would get Machida one more time. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But this matchup, It's much more favourable for Mousasi than his last fight against Johnny Eblen. Obviously, he defended the belt against Johnny Eblen. Eblen's gone on to have a lot of success. He recently won, defended his belt against a very good opponent. Unfortunately, the name has left my mind, but Gegard Mousasi, just got out-wrestled in that matchup. He's not going to get out-wrestled by Fabian Edwards, who is Leon Edwards' brother. And on top of being Leon Edwards' brother, they fight in a pretty similar way. They both throw a lot of kicks. Like, they throw kicks to the body, legs, and the head. They're both very, natural on the feet, natural strikers. And on top of that, they're both good grapplers, because Fabian Edwards does have good grappling in his back pocket himself. He probably won't offensive wrestle in this matchup, though. I think Gegard Mousasi, if anyone in the fight, will be the one to offensively wrestle in the matchup if he get in trouble on the feet. But I think Mousasi can win. I think Mousasi's got the more well-rounded skill set out of the two. Especially 3 rounds as well. I was thinking 3 rounds. If Fabian Edwards has to win a 5-round fight, which it's not, he would have to fight the perfect fight. He'd have to keep Mousasi at bay for 5 rounds and just work him for 5 rounds. Now that's 3 rounds. I think Fabian Edwards' chances go up in a 3-round fight, especially because Mousasi's got so much more experience at 5 rounds. But I still think Mousasi wins in a 3-rounder. And in fact, it might even be better for Mousasi, because he's almost 38 years old now. 5-rounders over and over again must be getting pretty taxing on the body. Like, he just did go 5 rounds with Eblen. It was a long time ago. He's taken a lot of time off with Eblen. So I think I might have said Edwards there. But I do think that Mousasi gets it done. I think Mousasi gets it done by decision. And I think he beats Fabian Edwards. But it's going to be a good fight, because Fabian Edwards, maybe Fabian Edwards can make something happen. Maybe he can throw a head kick like Leon Edwards. Maybe he can keep Mousasi at bay and out kickbox him for 3 rounds. But I would be pretty surprised. I think Mousasi he's a great striker to start with. You know what I mean? He's been knocked out once in his career. 27 knockouts on his side. He's a great, and he's also a good grappler as well. On top of that, he can offensive wrestle. He can offensively grapple. I think he manages to do that to Fabian Edwards, and I do think he wins a decision in the main event of Bellator 296. Let me know what you think of the card. Let me know what you think of the picks in the comments below. I think I just realized I broke down 15 fights and picked 15 favorites. It happens, I guess. I mean, it's Bellator, guys. You can't really blame me too much. Yeah, I like Stephen Hill as an underdog. He was going to be my big underdog pick, but he's not an underdog anymore. And it happens, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as I said, I'll see you guys in the next video.